Daniel chapter 7 is where we will be in just a moment. All right, so we're looking at, we got a little bit into this vision, not very far. And so, well, there we go. Okay, so remember that the number at the top right-hand corner is there for you to send a text message to. If you have a question, if you don't want to ask it out loud, you can send it to that number. And yes, I mean during class. I mean text during class. Let's be real, we do it anyway. So let's make it a little more productive. So you can send those questions if you don't want to ask them out loud, and we will try and address them. Okay? So in this chapter, which is where we begin our apocalyptic session, we went through and we read some of it last week, and we kind of explained some of the basics of how we kind of get our parameters and get our bearings and get our markings, okay? A lot of times we want to dig in and start dissecting when we should take a step back and see kind of the skeletal structure of things that are going on, and then once we understand that, then we move in and we start honing in on the pictures. So the first 14 verses are the vision itself, and then the rest of the chapter is a discussion that Daniel has concerning the interpretation with the angel. So let's read the vision once again, because that's one of the things we want to do, and always remember that we're trying to, when we're studying apocalyptic literature, we're trying to read the whole image, the whole section as we find it, so that we can let that image settle, okay? So, chapter 7, verse 1, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream in the visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion that had eagle's wings. Then I looked, and the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him, and thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. And as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. He came to the Ancient of Days, and he was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. Okay. So big picture, Daniel sees the seas being very tempestuous, and then you've got 4 beasts that come up out of those seas successively. That is, they come up one after the other, and they are beasts that are what we would consider to be mutant. They're not naturally created. Okay, it's a hybrid of multiple animals coming together, right? So you've got that taking place, and then on the fourth one, it's very different. As a matter of fact, he doesn't really even compare it to any other animal. It's just a completely different type of beast. And from that beast, there is 10 horns, and there's just one little horn that comes up in the place of 3 others that are plucked up by its roots. And it has eyes and a mouth, and it begins to speak great things against God. And as it speaks great things against God, the judgment seat of God is set. God kills that horn, kills that beast, and absolutely destroys it. And in the midst of that process, one like a son of man appears, and he is given a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Okay, so we're seeing a strong contrast between destructible kingdoms and indestructible kingdoms, between kingdoms that are beastly and kingdoms that are ruled by this son of man, this human-like creature. Okay, so let's give me just a second, because that's the PowerPoint. I want to go back to where we can draw a little bit. If I can figure out what this thing is doing to me. There we go. That's not what I wanted. Okay. So here is the beginnings of kind of an illustrated. These are from freebibleimages.org. Where we have this first box where we've got the winds are stirring from 4 different directions, and we've got the sea being tumultuous, okay? And we talked about how the winds coming from the 4 directions, that's a common biblical image. And when you have winds coming from 4 directions, you've got that's a peculiar circumstance. It's going to create a lot of turmoil. And then you've got the sea, whether it be the Mediterranean or just oceans. It doesn't really matter, because the image is focusing in on the sea. And we've talked about how the Jews viewed the sea, that it was symbolic of humanity. It was constantly moving and in turmoil. Places like Isaiah 17, verses 12 and 13. And then some of the other images here, there was the idea of chaos that came from that. And so basically the world is viewed as in a time of chaos. And then from that chaos, you have all these different kingdoms arise. And that's ultimately how it happens, right? World history, ever since we've had the development of nations, has been the chaos of the nations and fighting for superiority, and one becomes superior, and then that one is done away with, and another one becomes superior, and so forth. So that's what is taking place. Now, we get to the first one, and we talked just a second, I think, last week about verse 4. Then the first was like a lion that had eagle's wings, okay? And so we talked about lion, of course, being the king of the jungle. The eagle is the king of the air. And so these are 2 images coming together of royalty. There's a lot of Babylonian art. There's a lot of art in ancient Near East, Middle Eastern culture, of lions with wings. So this is not an image that's just completely foreign. It's seen in Babylonian art. 2 Samuel 1 in verse 23, David compares Saul and Jonathan to an eagle and a lion because of their kingly state. Okay? So then we don't see it on this image, but this lion has its wings plucked off. Okay? So at a certain point, these go away, and then it begins to stand up on its back 2 paws like a man. Now, here's the question: what do you make of that? Some people say that this is like it's like a promotion. They get better because you have an animal becoming like a man. Another way of looking at it is just the opposite. You had the fierce nature of a lion being kind of tamed like a man. Very similar to what happens to Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 4. And again, what we're doing is we're talking through some of these things, okay? We're not giving definitive answers yet. basically because I don't want. I could sit here and I could give you a list of what everything means according to me, and you'd walk out of here and all you would know is what it meant according to me, and you wouldn't know how I got it, and you wouldn't know that there were differing opinions, and I'm not interested in teaching that way, okay? I'm just not interested in that. That does not help anybody. That's telling you what to think. It is not teaching you how to think about the issues in front of us, and that's what I'm more concerned about, okay? So, one of the things we are sure of, though, when we look at these beasts that come out of the sea, is that they are symbolic of nations, okay? One of the things we see throughout Daniel is the words king and kingdom are directly connected, and that just makes sense, right? In these cultures, you don't have democracy. Everything's monarchy. So, if you mention a king, if he's a king, it means he's got a what? Okay? If you mention a kingdom, it means it has a what? Okay, so they're connected. And so the words, even though it may say it has a reference to a king, yeah, but most likely it's using it in the more encompassing term. And the same thing is true of kingdom as well. So what we have then here, this particular image, and we talked about how this is parallel to Daniel chapter 2. This particular image is the image of Babylon. Okay? And about its rise to power. Now look, you can go through, and some people will try and interpret the wings and wings being plucked and all that kind of stuff. And it's possible, but it's something that I couldn't say with certainty. You could look at if the lion being stood up on two legs with the wings being plucked is weakening the animal, then you could make a very strong case, in my opinion, that when Nebuchadnezzar died, after him, they had a succession of very weak rulers, and they ultimately were toppled. And so the plucking of the wings could be symbolic of Nebuchadnezzar was the one who helped them rise to power, and then when he was gone, everything just kind of collapsed. Whether or not that's true, ultimately, that's not exactly what the vision is concerned with. Okay? And remember, one of the rules we have to go through is, what is the intention of the vision? Okay? I'm not so sure he wants us to dissect every single image, although I think you can. I'm not so sure that's what he wants us to do. Okay? So, that is the nation of Babylon. Okay? Now, let's look at verse 5 real quick. It says, "And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, Arise, devour much flesh." Okay? Now, if we're looking at this particular image, and we're talking about the succession of nations and it being parallel to Daniel chapter 2, then this would be the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? The Medo-Persian Empire, which we've already seen. Daniel chapter 6, they're the ones that come in and or Daniel chapter 5, they're the ones that come in and overthrow Babylon, okay? Now, the bear, the bear is also a symbol of a very fierce animal. For an example, you've got Amos 5 and verse 19. Okay? And what God is saying there is this. You're going to run into trouble and you're not going to be able to escape judgment. He said it's going to be like this. If you are running and then you meet a lion, and then to run from the lion you meet a bear, and you run from the bear and you get inside and you lean on the wall and it breaks and a snake bites your hand. What's the point? You can't get away from any of it. You're dealing with fierce animals. Judgment is going to overtake you, okay? So the bear, and you remember in 1 Samuel 17 that David's argument for why he should be allowed to fight Goliath, he talks about rescuing his sheep from the paw of the lion and from the bear. And so, look, I don't want to see a bear anywhere other than the zoo, okay? And I don't think you do either. So it's a fierce animal. Now, notice it says that it was raised up on one side. To be honest with you, the interpretation of that phrase is difficult to begin with, just from from Aramaic into English. Remember, we're still in the Aramaic sections of Daniel. That won't stop. Aramaic won't stop until chapter 8. So there's some difficulty there, rising up on one side. If this is the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? So historically speaking, the Medes were always the weaker side. They kind of rose up first and then joined forces with the Persians, and then the Persians kind of took the lead, okay? So some people have, when they interpret this raising up on one side, some people see that as it starts to get up. That's the rise of Media, and then when it continues to get up, that's the Persian Empire taking over. I don't know. I think it's the Medo-Persian Empire. The other stuff, I'm not so certain about. The same thing is true with the 3 ribs in its mouth. What if you see an animal chewing on bones, what are you assuming? It killed something. It's eating something, okay? Now, does this have reference to the rise of Cyrus the Great and 3 nations that he put down? Maybe. Okay? But also, most likely not. But we're looking at these things, trying to think through them a little bit, historically speaking, okay? And then this beast is told to arise and devour much flesh. That is, take over, become the new world superpower, in essence, okay? So then, any questions? I know I've got one through text message. I'll get to it in just a second. But are there any questions anybody wants to ask before we move to the next one? All right. Let's look at this leopard then. Verse 6, after this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard had 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Okay? Now, if we're following in the succession of nations, then what we're dealing with is Greece. Does Greece have 2 E's? I can't spell. Or does it just have 1? Is that right? Okay, there we go. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about either way. I'll tell you this. How about that? Okay. G for Greece. This is the Greek Empire, okay? Now, here's one of the things we know about. So let's think about the leopard for a minute, because that's the first image we're introduced to. Okay, what is a leopard known for? Speed, okay? So the leopard is known for its speed. As a matter of fact, in Habakkuk 1:8, I do know how to spell Habakkuk, strangely enough. In Habakkuk 1:8, the Babylonian Empire is pictured as a leopard pouncing to its prey. And so the speed is kind of the idea that is going on here. Now, and I think we are correct in saying that we're dealing with Greece, okay? Here's one of the things about the rise of the Greek Empire, okay? So when people think of Greece in ancient times, they think of a united nation. Forget that idea, because that's not who they were. Okay? The Greeks were not a united nation. They were different city-states that would often war with each other. Okay? The Spartans and the Athenians, and on we could go. Now, that was the majority of their history before the rise of Alexander the Great, whose father was Philip of Macedon. Okay? Macedonia in the New Testament, we're starting to see that. Okay, so the Greek Empire, Philip of Macedon is assassinated. We're not exactly sure who did that. But Philip of Macedon is assassinated. His young son Alexander takes the throne, okay? And he takes it in his early 20s. And in 7 to 7.5 years, he conquers most of the known world at his time. He unites, the first thing he does, he has to unite all of those Greek city-states. And this is when Greece finally kind of becomes a nation. All right? They became a nation by force. He conquered them and forced them together. Then, we'll see this in chapter 11, what had happened in previous generations, the Medo-Persian Empire had invaded Greece and tried to conquer them. Well, Alexander was a student of history, one of the great Greek philosophers being his teacher or private tutor, and so he was going to avenge that. And so he led an invasion into the Medo-Persian Empire and conquered it, okay? And so he ends up dying under mysterious circumstances at the age of 33. But in 7 to 7.5 years, he conquers everything that the Medes and the Persians had, conquers all of Greece, and starts moving his way even further, like over into India and some of those places, right? Hey, he did that in 7 years. Is that fast or slow? That's lightning fast, okay? Especially in a time here. From the time we entered World War II, how long did it take? People say 41, but actually it was really 42. I mean, December of 41, that's basically 42. So from 42 to the middle of 45, we're talking 3 years. 2.5, 3 years, okay? That's modern advancements. That's all different types of things. This is a person without modern advancements, and he's doing it in 7 years, and he's doing it winning battles that statistically and rationally he has no business winning. He's a military genius, and he has the ability to motivate people to follow him, okay? So with the leopard's rise and with it having 4 heads, okay? So if you've got 4 heads, a mutant with 4 heads, that's different sets of eyes. You can look and see in all different types of directions, right? You can protect yourself. You're looking out, you're hunting, you're doing a number of different things. He's got all these exploits. They're being pulled in different directions, is the idea. And then the wings also being there is just kind of playing again, perhaps, on the imagery of speed. And so the Greco-Roman, or the Greek Empire has a very fast rise. Now, once he dies, it all goes haywire. That's next chapter, so we're not going to go too far into that right now. But the kingdom is split up, okay? And I understand, if you're not a history nerd like I am, this is not scintillating. But the majority of what you're going to read in the New Testament and the circumstances in the world, the language that is spoken, the cities that are there that are significant, the moral belief systems that created the different religious sects, such as the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes, all of that is going to grow out of the Greco-Roman Empire, okay? And the influence that, for an example, in Acts chapter 6, you remember they were taking up a collection for widows. And there was a complaint that was made that the Hellenist widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution. Who are the Hellenists? They're Greeks. Hellenism was the Greek way of life. Alexander is known as the apostle of Hellenism. He spread Greek life and Greek thought. That's why the majority of the world at the time of the Roman Empire, they spoke Koine Greek, because he spread the language. He created centers of learning. Alexandria of Egypt, one of the centers of learning for centuries, that had one of the greatest libraries the world has ever known. That's him. He's spreading Greek culture, okay? And that's dealing with a number of things that are going to come up and how his kingdom splits. And, I mean, I could spend the next hour just talking about just how vital this is, okay, to understanding New Testament era. So, here we've got the third beast. Now, let's look at the fourth one, okay? And remember, we're kind of going through this a little bit more on a slower pace right now. Once we hit 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I'm going to speed up, okay? So I realize we're not going at breakneck speed, but it's going to speed up. So we're just kind of walking through, okay? So now in verse 7, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth, and it devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And it was different from all the other beasts that before it. It had 10 horns, okay? So it's a diverse beast. We have no idea. Like, you can't really compare it to another animal, okay? And it's incredibly tough, all right? Its teeth are of iron. It tears everything up. And then the crumbs that fall from its mouth, its feet just stomp it into obliteration. It just destroys everything in its path, okay? And it's got 10 horns. And then when you get to the 10 horns, you get this crazy little horn here. If you'll look carefully, there's a mouth here, and then there are eyes here. And you know, this image kind of makes me laugh because it makes me think of the Disney movie Moana, those little crazy people that attack them when they're out on the water. They kind of look like this. You know, they come on a ship. Anyway, you'd have to see it. But anyway, it kind of looks like that guy. So, if we're following the succession, we're following the Roman Empire here, okay? Again, we have a diverse beast. We have nothing to compare it to, okay? But it has 10 horns. Okay, so if I'm looking at this and I'm seeing horns, there are a couple of things I want to remember about horns. Number one, throughout Scripture, a horn is a symbol of power. Okay? It's a symbol of power. In the Psalms, when you see a reference to a horn, an animal horn, you're dealing with power. Number two, in apocalyptic literature, when you look at horns, many times you are referencing kings in particular. Okay? You're referencing kings in particular. So, that would then mean that we've got 10 kings here. But here's the issue, okay? 10 kings. But is it literal or is it figurative? Because what is 10? It's just a perfect number. Okay, then you've got, as the image unfolds, you've got 3 little horns that are plucked up by one. Now, is this 3 literal? Or is it figurative? Because 3 can also be a number that's kind of like, 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Okay? So, we're looking at a number of things here. Then you got this guy, which is a king that's obviously out of control. Okay? So we know we're looking at the Roman Empire. We know we're looking at Roman kings or emperors. And we've got one that's running its mouth against the heavens. Okay? So very quickly, since our time is out, I'm going to give you the 2 options available here. And this is a debated thing throughout history, throughout the study of Scripture and whatnot. But there are 2 possibilities. All right, so either we are taught, depending upon when you study Roman emperors, there's always a debate about who is the first one. So how do you start the counting? Okay, now in one theory, that would make this little horn that speaks great things against God, it would make him Vespasian. Okay, now Vespasian is the man who is going to surround Jerusalem and is going to, you remember in Matthew 24, another apocalyptic text when Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple. Vespasian is the emperor or the general who's going to start that. And then, strangely enough, there are 3 guys that precede him very shortly. Galba, Otho, and Vitellius. Okay? Can't spell Greece, but I can spell random emperors. Anyway, these three guys are going to precede him. He does not destroy Jerusalem. He goes back to Rome to claim the throne. His son Titus is the one who destroys Jerusalem in AD 70. So this is a possibility that it's Vespasian. The second possibility is that it's Domitian. Okay? And Domitian is key, and we're going to meet him a lot in Revelation, because Domitian is one of the first major persecutors on a more global scale of Christians. So, keep this in mind. Here is Daniel in Babylon in the 500s, and God is showing him things that are going to come all the way down to the very end of time, the end of biblical timeline in the New Testament in Revelation. As a matter of fact, in Revelation 13, when that beast rises up from the earth, it's going to look like multiple animals. It's going to look like a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a diverse animal. It all flows together. Okay? So, I'm going to leave it there. Any questions anyone has before we're done, and then I will just answer this one individually. All right. We will pick up there hopefully next Wednesday.